question we're asking you tonight on KTN Weekend Prime is, do you believe Haki Africa and the other individuals and organizations that were named by the government are funding terror or are terrorist sympathizers? That's the question. The hashtag we're using is terror funding. Please do get in touch with us on Twitter at KTN Kenya, at Yvonne Okwara. You can also SMS us. The number is 22155. I'm joined by the Executive Director of Haki Africa this evening, Hussein Khalid. Thank you very much for joining us, for making the trip all the way. Let's start by talking about the work of Haki Africa. What do you do?
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity, Yvonne, for us to be here and to talk about our work. And let me begin by, first of all, passing my condolences to the families of those young brothers and sisters who passed away in this tragic Garissa attack that saw about 147 of our youth losing their lives. Yes, Haki Africa as an organization has been at the forefront of building bridges, also to speak, between government and communities at the coast, but also generally in Kenya. As a human rights institution, we have been, challenging the norms within the communities to break away from the past and to try and introduce new ideas and new methods of addressing community issues and community concerns. Of course, in Mombasa, at the coast, security is a primary issue of concern. And if you're a human rights organization that does not address issues of security, then you're really not doing much. So we have prioritized security as a major concern. And the biggest problem that we have currently, that at the coast we are faced with, is actually the gap between communities and the government. And as institutions, human rights institutions, we've identified this as an issue that actually needs serious tackling. And that is why we have initiated programs that are geared towards bringing the communities together with the government. We're talking about the youth who are within Mombasa. We're talking about the police. We're talking about the county commissioner, the provincial administration, and other institutions of government, working with women, working with youth, working with religious leaders to try and promote harmony and cohesion within the coastal region.
Where do you get your funding from?
As an organization, a human rights organization, just like any other human rights organization in Kenya, of course, we do solicit for funds from different entities, some of them local, some of them majority international. As an organization, Haki Africa is currently funded by the Norwegian Embassy. We also get some funding from the British High Commission, the Open Society Initiative for Eastern Africa, and others that are supporting the work that we are doing.
All right. What makes you, when you think about the situation you are in now, and we will have some of those pictures, if you can run some of those pictures of the work you've done. I think you've had the Chief Justice, P.S. Mutai Ringo, senators as well, Hassan Omar, Hassan Wario, who's the Cabinet Secretary for Sports. How do you think you found yourself in this position, being blacklisted?
To be sincere, Yvonne, it came as a huge surprise to us, because we believe that as an organization, and not just Haki Africa, but also our sister organization, Muhuri, we know that we have been at the forefront of actually addressing or trying to deal with violent extremism within our communities. And having been listed in that particular Gazette notice, to us was not just shocking, but also we failed to understand why that was the case. We know that part of our responsibility as a community, the coastal region has been very much sidelined or marginalized for many years, and the communities have become sort of like accustomed to not being involved in majority of the decisions that are being taken by the governments or the government authorities within the country. So as a strategy, we have always tried to bring the government from Nairobi and bringing them to the community so that we can narrow that gap between the state and the people, so that the people can feel that actually this is a government that is out there to serve them. I am a Kenyan. I don't have any dual citizenship. I have nowhere else to go.
Okay, let's talk about...
Yes, so if we don't ensure that we have a government and a community that is working together, we'll have no other place to run to.
All right, there's been a lot of, I know we have the images, but let's take a look at some of the letters, exchange of information between yourself, the county government, Nelson Mara, as well as even requests from the regional prisons commander. If you can have some of those on screen, that would be helpful. So you've worked with people in government.
Correct. We have worked with people in government, yes, on different occasions, not once, not twice, including cabinet secretaries who've attended some of our meetings. And you see, for us, at the end of the day, we want to show our communities that, we belong to this country and we must be in the mainstream agenda of the country. And that is the mistake that we've done, because we don't understand why this has been the case. Perhaps it's because we've been outspoken on issues of violations of human rights in the fight against terrorism. As you know, and as every Kenyan knows, killings and disappearances at the coast have been reported in so many occasions. And as human rights institutions, Haki Africa and Muhuri have been at the forefront of ensuring that whenever a killing occurs, that justice is done, that the police are held accountable, that they follow through with some of these matters, because the community feels like their issues are not addressed. If people are being killed, if religious leaders are being killed, if youth are being killed, and then the police seem to not do much, that only creates suspicion of the government.
All right, let's talk about the killings of some of those controversial preachers, some who are radical. Sheikh Abu Drogo is one of them. And you were accused by even a majority of the people who are watching the show tonight by saying you stood there and defended Abu Drogo and, came to not his rescue, but sort of came to his defense when he was a known radical preacher. Why would you do that?
First of all, let's make it very clear. Not Haki Africa, not Muhuri. We have never defended any radical. We have always stood firm and said that we must address the issues that are being highlighted by some of these individuals. So I would challenge anyone who would come out with evidence showing that as institutions, as human rights organizations, we have defended sayings or pronouncements that are jihadist in their tone or any other form of crime, because that is very clear. But Yvonne, as human rights institutions, we are bound by international human rights regulations. And international human rights regulations, we don't defend individuals. We don't defend institutions. We defend human rights. Now, it is the Constitution of Kenya that was overwhelmingly voted by Kenyans that says suspects have rights. Just imagine one scenario. If today we have our deputy president at the ICC, what if we denied him his rights as a suspect? What if we said you have no right to access your lawyer? What if we said you have no right to your family?
Is that what you believe happened with Sheikh Abu Drogo?
No, I'm saying in some of the cases, because Abu Drogo was killed.
Right.
Yeah, and what we are saying is that the family of Abu Drogo has the right to know who killed their kin. The family of Abu Drogo has a right, like every other Kenyan who is killed at any point in time. So in a community where people are killed every other week, and these are concerns that are raised by the people, that people are killed and there are no answers forthcoming from the government, the only thing as human rights institutions we can do is ask the government to actually investigate. That's all that we've been saying, that people need answers and the government must come out clearly to investigate, not just victims of counterterrorism, but victims of terrorism too. We were the first organization in Lamu that went to investigate, and we released a report asking the government to come out clearly who was behind the Mpeketoni killing. The Likoni church attack that occurred last year, Haki Africa was the first institution that condemned the attack and demanded that the authorities speedily investigate to ensure they bring the culprits to book.
Would you say it's a fair characterization when people say you only speak out when it's Abu Drogo and other controversial clerics, but there's some who say, well, we haven't heard them say anything about the Garissa terror victims. I know that's how we started off the conversation here, but there is the belief that you are speaking very highly for the rights of suspects who we know under international law have rights as well, but that we don't see the same fervor when it comes to talking about the victims of terror activities. Is that a fair characterization, do you think? And where do you think people get that impression? Because it is a perception that you have to deal with.
It's true. It might not be the fact, but it is a perception. and as an institution and as human rights organizations, whether it's a perception or it's factual, we have to deal with it. And we recognize that. But then we are working with our brothers and sisters, including the Standard Media Group, to address some of these concerns, because there has never been a terror attack incident that Haki Africa or Muhuri has never condemned. We have been at the forefront in some of these occasions to even support. I will tell you, for example, at Haki Africa, we provided employment until very recently to one of the victims of Likoni church attack. And we did that for several months just to help her to get back on her feet. As Haki Africa, as an organization, we have been at the forefront of trying to build harmony and peace between different victims. So it is not factual that we do not condemn terror attacks, but we know it is a perception. And it is a perception that we have to deal with. And we are really working around that, and we are in partnership with different media houses to try and ensure that that perception is challenged and the truth is actually communicated.
All right, let me bring out perhaps something in the past of the work of Muhuri and Haki, Muhuri specifically, that may lead people to think there's double standards in the work that you do. Back in, what year was that? A couple of years ago when Makwere talked, made some hate speech remarks. Muhuri, which you were at the helm of at the time, together with the NCIC, took a case to court challenging Makwere's statements when he talked about indigenous people at the coast who were being oppressed by the Arabs. That was a case in which you actively took some measures to take this to court. Some would say that what Abu Drogo was doing was exactly the same thing when he's calling for the killing of infidels and that sort of thing. So here's the scenario that Kenyans face, that Muhuri is very quick when it comes to Makwere, but not the same when it comes to Abu Drogo. Was there ever any measure to reach out to Abu Drogo or to even go to court and say, hey, there's a cleric here, every Friday he's preaching some radical messages to his people, we would like him taken to court, but you do the same for Makwere? Why the difference?
There's no difference whatsoever. Let me confirm to you that as Haki Africa, we did call these radicals to sit down and tell them that actually you cannot continue in these efforts. We had been very disappointed by the religious institutions within the coastal region, and because they've been afraid to come out publicly to demand, because they fear for their lives, and understandably so, because the moment you go out there and you speak about, against radicalization and extremism, you become a target. And the unfortunate fact is that even when they have been killed, up to this point in time, no one has been held accountable for the deaths of religious leaders, including Imam Idris, who was killed last year. So as institutions, we are on record, and there are media cuttings, newspaper cuttings, which we have with us, which we even presented to the government recently, showing the kind of work that we've done to bring down some of these radicals within the society, to talk to them and to tell them that this cannot continue. We have pictures, we have even newspaper cuttings, so it is not true that we only work with one side. And we feel that, society has actually neglected some of these individuals because they feel they're afraid of them. But as human rights institutions, like I said, we defend human rights. And when any individual comes up to utter or to make utterances that are likely to cause chaos within the society, as human rights institutions, we have a responsibility to address that particular concern.
So you raised the alarm?
We have raised the alarm.
You went to the authorities?
We worked with the authorities. Not we went to the authorities, we worked with them and we mobilized them. We took these people to meetings and spoke to them. We brought them together with the moderate religious leaders, and we have pictures, we have evidence, we have newspaper cuttings showing that we were actually trying to generate some intra-religious dialogue so that we can address these problems that we're faced with at the coast.
All right. You mentioned, having your meeting and presenting some of this evidence. Could you tell us a little bit about how that meeting went earlier this week?
Yes.
What did they tell you? Did they present this evidence they have against you?
Well, Yvonne, you'll be surprised to learn that up to this point in time, no government official, no communication whatsoever has been forthcoming as to why we were included in the list. We have not been told up to this point in time that Haki Africa or Muhuri, you have been, seen doing ABCD or you were quoted.
So what did they say?
Up to this point in time, they have asked us to show cause why we should not be in the list. We don't understand why we are in the list in the first place, because everything that we've been doing, the government is aware. We've been filing our returns. Muhuri has been in existence for many years. Every year they have filed returns. We have been in existence, we've been filing returns, and the government has all the information. So we went there to the National Counterterrorism Center as directed by the Inspector General with all our documents. We can account for every cent that we've spent. And that is the information that we've given them. Audited accounts, audited by certified accountants. We've given that information. They gave us a form and told us to fill in to show who our directors are, and the sources of funding, how we spend our money, and that is public information. You don't need to gazette us to get that information.
All right. And in presenting that evidence, you've talked about Maina Kiai and, you know, a couple of these people being in your board. Some would say that doesn't necessarily mean you're not funding terror.
Correct.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you're broad-based in the approach that you use. Muhuri, you know, Muslims for Human Rights Initiative, and there is the accusation that you only speak for a certain section of the community, a particular religious side of the community. Do you speak for Christians? Do you speak for indigenous peoples of the coast? Do you speak for Arabs? You know, there is that. And then there is also the interesting coincidence where you are the single denominator. Muhuri and Haki Africa, two organizations that find themselves in the list of 86. What's your reaction to that?
The most recent cases that we've handled, the most recent cases were not Muslim-related cases. The Yebei family, we were at the forefront of ensuring that the family got the body at Voi Mortuary. We had actually gone to Voi Mortuary looking for another person who had disappeared when we came across the body. And we, you know, the mortuary attendants told us that the police have had a particular interest in this body, and so one thing led to another, and we made sure, even though we felt our lives are at risk, but we said this is a human rights matter, and we will stand by it and ensure that the family gets justice. The minimum we can do is to make sure that they get the body. None of them was a Muslim, and we worked with them. The other case that we've handled as Haki Africa is of Margaret Njeri in Mpeketoni. Margaret Njeri was assaulted actually by a Muslim police officer. That matter is in court. I don't want to get into the details, but it is Haki Africa that stood with the family, and we insisted until the police officer was arrested. We assisted and worked with the family to ensure the bill was paid, and we were with the family up to the point of burial. So it is not true that we only work with certain populations of within the country. It might be that some of these cases have more media attention, than others, but we can confirm both Haki Africa and Muhuri have had so many cases. Kwekwe, the 14-year-old girl who was beaten, one of the accused persons is a Muslim. Those who are accused or charged with exactly.
Yes.
So it is not true. And as human rights institutions, like I said, we defend human rights cases. We do not look at who is behind the cases, who is the victim or who is the aggressor. As long as it's a human rights case, we will definitely address that case.
Hussein Khalid, what are you going to do now? What's your next step? Are you going to take any action against the government? Your accounts have been frozen. Literally, that means your operations, are at a standstill. What's your next move?
Well, one, we want to speak to the government, and this is an opportunity that we have. We are actually trying to help the situation on the ground. I was born in Mombasa, and I see almost a whole generation getting lost. We know that, there are so many complaints, and families have come forward of their kin, of their children going to Somalia. That is something that is really hurting us as a people, as a community. And we are asking the government that please, you need to work with us. Directives such as this, where you sit in Nairobi, because I personally believe the local authorities were not involved. Because if the local authorities were involved, because they know the work that we're doing. So do you believe
the county commander, for example, supports your work?
We, as human rights institutions, Haki Africa and Muhuri, when the suspects were listed in the national newspaper, they reported to us. We never told them to run away. We are the ones who actually took them to the county commander and told him, these are the people you are looking for. They have come to us
then
and
you
we have
found
brought them
yourself
to
on
you.
the list as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we are helping the government. We are trying to address these problems. And it's very unfortunate that today we are here trying to defend our freedom, to defend human rights.
So you're only going to talk to the government? If this carries on, what next?
I mean, we will persist. You know, I've been in this work for so many years, almost 15, 17 years, yeah? And we know that persistence works. And we will persist, asking the government that please come down, talk to us. It's ironic that sometimes you get, you know, ambassadors from different countries. Sometimes you even get, you know, top ministers from different countries coming to the communities to talk to civil society. But we never see our own cabinet secretaries, our permanent secretaries coming to sit down with us, asking us for solutions.
Although in your
and
case
we do
that
have
happened.
solutions.
In your case that happened. PS Mutei Ringo, Hassan Mario
came to
has
us,
attended
exactly.
that.
And
Chief
that is
Justice.
attending our activities and all that. But we need to sit down with civil society. You can't make pronouncements in Nairobi because this for us is an embarrassment. Not just an embarrassment to us as institutions, but also to our government, that the same institutions that are actually helping you to address or counter violent extremism, today you have them listed as part of a problem. That's a big embarrassment to us and to the government that we need to address.
In 30 seconds, if persistence does not work, will you just lay down and say, okay, your accounts have been frozen, you're not working? If persistence doesn't get you the results you want?
Yvonne, we will never give up on our community. We will never give up on our government.
Will you just start another organization and get new funding for that?
We will never give up on our government. We will never give up on our people, on our communities, on Kenyans.
Okay.
We will do whatever it needs to be done, but we must ensure that security, human rights are guaranteed.
Okay, thank you very much. Haki Africa Executive Director Hussein Khalid, thank you for joining us tonight. The question we are asking you is, do you believe Haki Africa and indeed the other organizations in that list released by the government are funding terror in the country?